The Big Sky by A.B. Guthrie, a book review. Now this is one of my scripted book reviews. The idea being I go through kind of my old blog entries or old book reports to make a YouTube video out of it. Yeah, this one. This was a book which was assigned reading in a university course I took on the history of the American West. Now, it's a historical fiction, but a lot of my professors assigned historical fiction as a way to kind of get the feel for history. The book was written in 1947, but kind of takes place during the 1830s, and it's describing the kind of the American expansion westward in the 1830s, kind of through the eyes of like a couple traders or travelers, frontiersmen, I guess. I didn't know this until later, I was looking this up on Wikipedia one day, but this book was quite famous in its day. Still famous? I don't know. Got made into a movie in 1952 starring Kirk Douglas. And it was part of like a trilogy which followed some of these same characters. So some of the characters in this novel appear in the other novels. One of them is called The Way, Way West, which I haven't read, but I did see the movie of it. There was a 1960 movie with Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas's father, and Robert Mitchum, which I actually saw. It was on TV one night. This was when I was in Japan. It was on TV in Japan. And there was no other English shows on, so I just watched it. And I actually found it really interesting. I had no idea until Wikipedia and everything came out that that was kind of connected to the same trilogy as this book. Anyways, this isn't a book review so much as a book report. You know how these things go. You had to kind of pick an angle and argue it. So it's kind of tends to be a little myopic in that way. You're not thinking of the whole book, you're just kind of looking for stuff that supports your thesis or doesn't support your thesis. It's actually a really good and really interesting book, and that doesn't quite come through in this book report because I'm just focusing in on the racial question. But the first thing I thought of when I picked up the book, I saw 1947, I thought, oh, 1947. Boy, there's probably going to be some racist stuff in this book. But it actually wasn't too bad, but there may be a little bit of unconscious racism or subtle racism, and that's kind of the stuff I try and tease out in this book report. Is there kind of any kind of unconscious kind of bias going on here? Like there's no overt racism in kind of the classic, like, old school racist way, but maybe some subtle racism going on here. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm being too harsh on the book. I don't know. Let me know. But yeah, this is the book report here. So, Boone Caudill embarks on a journey full of excitement and adventure after he flees from the East. Boone encounters many people in the West and sees many places. Boone fights Indians, kills Indians, lives with Indians, and even marries an Indian. Yet, how realistic is the portrayal of Indians in The Big Sky? Is the author A.B. Guthrie Jr. a racist, or does he admire Indian culture? Oh, by the way, Indian here means Native Americans. Yeah, I'm not sure nowadays, maybe, if I had written this nowadays, maybe people would say Native Americans instead of Indians. I mean, I don't want to sound like this wasn't around in the 90s, because we knew about it in the 90s, but maybe it's become more sensitive since then, or I don't know. Anyways, according to the copyright date, The Big Sky was written in 1947. It was before the Civil Rights Movement, before Indian Power. Indian Power was a thing in the 60s. Before Dances with Wolves. Most popular movies and television shows of the time portrayed Native Americans as the bad guy, the savages against whom the white embodiment of goodness must struggle against. While not all popular media of the time shared this view, it would not be a surprise to find racism in something from this era. So, how does The Big Sky come out? Some of the characters within the Big Sky are unquestionably racist. Streak is the best example of this, and he voices his view of Indians very succinctly on page 179, where the character says, "Damn the goddamn Injuns." Streak attempts to take his frustrations from past Indians, like Indians he encountered in the past, out on the character of Poor Devil, Indian who's traveling with Boone. And when Boone objects to this form of scapegoating, Streak responds, "One's like to other as much as two peas." Another example of a character hostile to Indians is Russell, who, when explaining his policy towards Indians, states, "The only way to settle disputes with Indians is with a rifle. It writes a treaty they won't forget." However, Guthrie obviously does not approve of these characters. Streak is killed by Boone Caudill, the hero of the novel, when Streak threatens Poor Devil. Russell's views are contrasted with the more tolerant attitude of Dick Summers. In fact, it would seem that Guthrie uses the attitudes of these two characters to combat anti-Indian attitudes, which may still have been widespread at the time in which he was writing. However, even Boone Caudill, the hero of the novel, harbors some attitudes about the Indians that are far from positive. Boone's own thoughts about the Indians are outlined on page 280. "It was just that a man couldn't tell about Indians, no matter if he lived with them. They were prideful and easy to please or to anger, and quick to act in ways a man might not look for, and for reasons he might not think of." Boone also seems to put a low value on Indian life, for he kills them without any apparent remorse when he feels he has to. It should be pointed out, though, that Boone also kills Streak with no remorse. Streak is a white man, and shows surprisingly little regret when he kills his best friend, Jim Deakins. Oh, spoilers. Furthermore, Boone is obviously not a hero without flaws, and certainly not all of his reviews are reflective of Guthrie's. More telling of Guthrie's attitude would be the way he portrays the Indians themselves. Guthrie often portrays the Indians as violent. The most telling example of this is the massacre of Jordanius and the crew of the Mandan by the Blackfeet. The Blackfeet attack with no apparent provocation. Jordanius, who sought to win their friendship by returning Teal Eye, the daughter of one of their chiefs, is killed for his efforts. Guthrie describes Boone's revulsion at the inhumanity of the Indians. "He crawled away with a coldness on him, inside and out, thinking of people who beat a man's brains out or cut off his pizzle after he was dead." Pages 155 to 156. The Indians are later responsible for killing Zinon and wounding Jim. However, if the Indians are at times portrayed in a negative light, the white people are often shown as being worse. Russell and Streak are both examples of white inhumanity towards Indians. Boone's uncaring attitude towards his blind child is contrasted with Teal Eye's love for the child. There are plenty of unlikable characters in the Big Sky. Most of them are white. Some of them just happen to be Indian. More condemning of the author Guthrie, though, is the character of Poor Devil. Poor Devil is shown to be a likable character, friend to Boone, Jim, and Summers. However, Poor Devil appears to fulfill the role of the lovable idiot. It was popular at the time to make minorities into childlike characters. Blacks were often portrayed as smiling, submissive buffoons, and Asians were commonly portrayed as clowns. Is Poor Devil simply the Indian version of this minority stereotype, popular in Hollywood films during this period? Poor Devil is a unique case. Of all the other Indians presented, he alone is portrayed in this manner. Because Poor Devil is obviously mentally impaired, Would it be overly politically correct to accuse Guthrie of racism because of this? If Guthrie had created a white character who was mentally impaired, no one would have thought twice about it. However, the question merits consideration because Poor Devil is the most prominent Indian character in the book. Teal Eye is a flat character and mostly regulated to the background, despite the importance she plays to the plot. Why did Guthrie choose to make his most prominent Indian character, the only Indian who teams up with Boone, Jim, and Sumner's, not quite right in the head? Furthermore, Poor Devil's clownish appearance could not be explained simply by the fact that he was mentally impaired. He's described on page 164. It says, his ugly bone face creased into a sudden smile that showed he had two teeth missing in front. He had a crooked nose that came down almost to his lips and seemed about to poke into the hole that the teeth had left. So not only is he mentally impaired, but he's just really grotesque and ugly. Poor Devil is always smiling, no matter what happens. Now, even mentally impaired people are not normally happy all the time, right? But Poor Devil is always foolishly joyful. One of the characters says on page 225, Poor Devil's face was one big smile. Everything was a joke to that fool Indian. Now, whether Guthrie consciously created Poor Devil to fulfill the stereotype of the buffoon, childlike minority character or not, Poor Devil seems to fit the character perfectly. Despite that negative note, it's important to note that Guthrie does not appear to be an overt racist in kind of the old school, pro-segregationist, violent meaning of the word. He does not appear to be against interracial marriages. Evidence of this being that he includes one in the book. Granted, that marriage ends in failure and results in the death of Jim Deakins. And granted, Boone does not exactly have the best in-law relations. At one point he said, he would kill himself a chief if Jim was dead. He would stand Redhorn's scalp on a stick by his lodge, no matter if Redhorn was kin to him by woman. Page 282. However, despite the unhappy ending that marriage comes to, Guthrie does not seem to be against the concept of interracial marriage itself. Boone's foolishness ends the marriage, not Teal Eye's. In fact, Teal Eye is presented as the ideal woman before Boone ruins everything. This is contrasted with the marriage of both Dan Caudill and Dick Summers, both of whom married white women. Dan's wife, Cora, is a judgmental fundamentalist. Summers' wife nagged him in front of Boone. Boone compares marriage to a white woman with marriage to an Indian. Marriage to an Indian being the favorable alternative. This is kind of Boone's thoughts now from the book. It wasn't right for a woman to plague a man, leave alone an honest-to-God man like Dick. She had to leave him be, like a Blackfoot woman would know to do, like Teal Eye would know to do, looking at him with her big eyes, not saying anything, letting him have his way, not thinking he was right or wrong or drunk or sober, but just that he was himself. Page 360. In fact, earlier in the book, Jim and Boone were surprised that Summers would marry a white woman. When asked about Summers, Jim exclaims, "Married? Damn if he ain't. And to a white woman." Page 253. On the previous page, Jim had expressed his dislike of white women. The women are weak and lazy. They do not dress skins and cut wood and pitch and break camp. They are not like Teal Eye. Now, obviously, Guthrie's characters cling to ideals about what women should be like that would be considered quite sexist today. But the point is clear. White men are happier with Indian women. Although one cannot help but wonder how Guthrie would have felt about Indian men marrying white women. After all, even in the most racist areas of the South, it was accepted for white men to have sex with black women, but never the reversal of gender roles. However, since Guthrie does not make his opinion known on this one way or the other, it would be unfair to condemn him for what he did not write. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation going on in this book review. I should note, this was back in the 90s, so this was before the days of Wikipedia. Nowadays, I think if you wanted to know what like an author's view was, you could just kind of go on the internet and find out. I'm not sure if this would be on the internet or not, actually. I did actually go to Guthrie's Wikipedia page. Don't remember seeing it there. Maybe I missed it. It's probably on the internet somewhere. That wasn't quite as true back in the 90s. You kind of had to tease stuff out just from the book more. So this is just all me speculating based on what's in the book. Okay, finally, one last word in Guthrie's defense. Guthrie shows the white settlers in his book as having little regard for the environment or respect for it. Peabody is an excellent example of this. You appear to think, he says to Boone, that because the Indians haven't made good use of this great western country, that nobody can. When a country which might support so many actually supports so few, then, by thunder, the inhabitants have not made good use of the natural possibilities. That failure surely is justification for invasion, peaceful if possible, forcible if necessary, by people who can and will capitalize on opportunity. Peabody learns to respect nature when he and Boone are stranded in it later in the book. The attitude of Guthrie's Indians may not perfectly match the attitude of today's environmentalists, as evidenced by Redhorn's comment. The buffalo will last, will the Indian last? Then we do not care. However, Guthrie makes clear that it is the white advance which is destroying the West Boone so loves, and replacing nature's beauty with cities. Jim describes the problem of white civilization when Boone first meets him. I don't hanker to live in no anthill. Is Guthrie a racist or an advocate for the Indians? Do the comments made by Boone and the others about the Indians reflect Guthrie's view, or is Guthrie simply trying to show the attitudes of his time? Guthrie is not an extreme racist. In fact, he attacks the extreme racist attitudes in his book. However, the character of Poor Devil, just that alone, even if you can explain everything else away, indicates that it looks like there's at least some unconscious racist bias going on here. Given the decade in which Guthrie was writing in, 1940, the way in which Indians were popularly portrayed at that time, it is understandable that this would show in his writing. Big Sky remains an informative piece of literature despite these flaws.